Hello everyone, welcome to another video from Fairy's Cucina, doing it Dan's way. Today I'm going to show you steps on how I make a tasty gluten-free pizza and a loaf of bread all at the same time. I'll be discussing which flour I use as well as the process to make this awesome tasting gluten-free pizza. Better yet, this is one of the healthiest flour combinations I've found, which is high in nutrition and has some added health benefits with no thickeners. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to see more upcoming videos from Fairy's Cucina. You can see that I have two different types of brands. So there's the Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1 replacement. This is a really good brand. I have made it using this. And also the one that I really love is this Namaste, a perfect flour blend. Now there are some differences. Bob's Red Mill has potato starch in it. So if you look at some of the ingredients, sweet brown rice and white rice, sorghum. The difference between this one and this one is that the Namaste doesn't have potato starch. So if you are the type of person that the potato starch kind of bothers you a bit, then this is the best one. You can use any yeast that you want. You can use a dry active yeast. The yeast that I'm using right now, it's an Italian-based yeast. This one's an interesting yeast. I find that the taste on this one is phenomenal. This yeast combines dry active yeast with sourdough starter. So it's a blend. And I find that this yeast is just, oh my gosh, as it's developing, oh, the smell is just, you want to just like eat it. It's so good. Anyways, yeah, I know I'm a little over dramatic, but so what we're going to do is we're going to mix it. Now with this yeast here, you'll have to look at the directions of the yeast that you're using. In particular, for this one here, I'll be using about 60 grams of this yeast. You can see that it's very powdery. That's why I like it. And then I use about a teaspoon of pure cane sugar. Then you want room temperature water, and then you want to whisk it. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this sit. You can see that it's already thickened a bit. I might put a little bit. So I've put about 3/4 cup of water, warm water. And as it's sitting, you'll see that there really isn't any bubbles. And what we'll do is we'll let this sit for maybe about a couple of hours. I like to do a process called autolysing. So that's what I'm going to be doing right now. Now I'm going to initially start with just 1 cup of this perfect flour blend, Namaste's perfect flour blend, gluten-free flour. And I am going to be putting some water in it. And I'll be autolysing this. Otherwise, it needs to sit a lot longer. So if you do it this way, it's perfect. So you can see here, I've used only a cup. So in a couple of hours, then what I'm going to do is I will add the yeast to this and let it grow and let it sit for a good hour or an hour, hour and a half. And in another bowl, I will do the same thing with the amount of dough that I'm going to be using for this gluten-free pizza. So while the yeast is developing on its own and my small batch of gluten-free flour is also autolysing, I'm also going to be autolysing my larger batch of gluten-free flour. I will also tell you about how I mix it. I have made pizza just using this ingredient and it works out really good. It turned out really, really good. However, I find that it turns out a little bit better if you add a little extra tapioca flour. So right now I already have a cup of this Namaste Perfect Blend flour in my bowl. I'm adding about 3 more cups. I have a cup that's autolysing. And for tapioca, I add about half a cup. Okay, so that's about half a cup. And the tapioca flour just helps the stretchiness, you know, like when pizza, just because it doesn't have any gluten, so you need it to stretch nicely, just like a regular pizza. So we'll do that. Tapioca flour is really like almost like baby powder fine. It makes a mess. And then the other thing that I add is some baking powder. Yes, I add baking powder, even though we have rats. I got tapioca flour on my face. Yeah, we add baking powder, even though we have yeast. So I generally add about a teaspoon of baking powder. And I mix it. I don't add the salt right now. We'll be adding about a tablespoon of salt because this will be almost 2.2 pounds of flour, a kilogram of flour. I do just under a tablespoon for this size because then after you put salt on top, also when you're making the pizza. While the yeast is developing and our small batch is also developing and it's autolysing, we're going to be autolysing this as well. You don't want to hydrate it too much, just enough to get to make it wet. So far I've added about a cup and a half. Wow, this smells so good. Okay, so I've used, that was about 2.5 cups of water for 3.5 cups of flour. So 3 cups of the namaste and half a cup of the tapioca. So you can see here that it's, I don't know if you can see it, but you can see here that it does seem a little liquidy, and you know, this pizza dough, it is a little softer, you know, I'm not gonna lie. It's not gonna be like, you know, it's not gonna be like wheat flour, but there's a trick on how to spread that out, so I will show you that. Remember, it might seem a little liquidy right now, but as it sits, the starches in the gluten-free flour are going to absorb the water, and it's going to loosen the starches, and it's going to start bonding together. And you'll see that as it sits, it's going to get a little stiff. So that's exactly what you want. So the reason why we don't put salt at this stage, you leave salt to the end, because salt does do something funny with the dough. It doesn't aid the dough. So you always leave the salt at the end, just before we mix all the ingredients together. All right, so we're gonna let this sit also for another couple of hours, and then we'll come back to this. The yeast has been sitting for a couple of hours, actually a little bit more than a couple of hours. You can see here how it's starting to bubble, and it's like really nice and puffy here, so it's worked really good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to mix this in our small batch. What this will do is, while the yeast was hydrating with the water and the sugar kind of woke up the yeast, and now the yeast is really hungry. And so what it's going to do is use the starch that's in this leaven. So we put the yeast in here, and what we're going to do is cover it. We'll cover it for another 2 hours. Okay, I'm back. So it's now bubbling forth. It's been sitting for about 2 hours. So now what we're going to do is we're going to mix this with our other batch. This is the second batch, as you can see. I just wanted to, I don't know if you could see it, but I just wanted to show you the difference with how the yeast makes it work. So you can see here it's nice and bubbly, and you can see the different bubbles in the gluten-free leaven. Look at that. So this works really good. So now what we're going to do, and this has been autolysing, this one here, It's been autolyzing. I haven't really mixed it, but you can already see the consistency this is more clumpy, right? More like mashed potatoes, whereas this one here is less. This one, it's still a little bit clumpy, but it's not as clumpy as the other one. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix these two together. You wanna make sure that this gets mixed properly. Now, the benefit of autolyzing the dough ahead of time, which is just basically letting it sit with its moisture and all that, is that when you're mixing this together, the yeast, I find, works a little bit better, and it doesn't have to work as hard to try to get into those starches, because the starches have already kind of softened a bit. So this has been mixed. Well, we're gonna leave this now covered for a good 3 hours. We're gonna leave this on the counter, and every 30 minutes or so, an hour or so, you don't really have to, but every 30 minutes to an hour, if you have the time, just remember to come, and you can just give it a quick stir. So we're gonna go ahead and cover this for the next 3 hours, 3-4 hours, and we'll get to the next step. The gluten-free dough has been sitting for a good 4 hours. So why don't we take a look at it? I'll just grab that here. So you can see that the yeast has done a really good job, and actually you can see how all the holes in it, look at that, it looks really, really, really good. Okay, so what do we do at this point? As you can tell, this is pretty liquidy, right? It would be very hard, almost looks like a little bit like pancake mix. So at this point, what we want to do is add a little bit of salt, olive oil, and then we'll add more of the gluten-free flour and toughen it up a bit. So why don't I just go ahead and do that? Just a little bit of olive oil. Salt. And again, I usually put maybe about a teaspoon. So now we're going to start adding our flour. At this point, as you can see, I've added probably about 3.5 cups more flour. So this total about 5 cups. Yeah, again, this about 5 cups will give you about 5 medium to large pizzas. But I'm planning on making some bread with this as well. So as you can see, you add just enough to stiffen up the flour, and this is like really puffy. I did dust this. So this now is going to end up sitting in the fridge overnight. I might just transfer this into a smaller bowl just because I don't have any room in the fridge, but this will just sit overnight. And then tomorrow morning, what I'll do is I'll take it out and I'll leave it on the counter, and it'll be ready for me to make the pizza. So we are on day 2. The gluten-free flour dough has been sitting in the fridge overnight. I put it in a Ziploc bag, and what it does is it helps to maintain the moisture that's in there, and it won't dry out. So I'm going to now take this out and put it back in the bowl. And if you remember, before we put it in the fridge, it was really sticky and it didn't really form properly. We did add some flour to it, so now it is a little sticky. That's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to end up adding some flour to this right now, some gluten-free flour, and just cover it. It's more just for dusting, and then what we'll do is let it rise for the rest of the day. Okay, so I've added the flour, and we ended up putting just enough flour to dry it up. And as I mentioned, what we're going to do is just let it sit now. It's been a couple of hours that our dough has been sitting since this morning. It's around, actually a few hours because it's around noon. And our guests are going to be coming in a couple of hours. I do put it on parchment paper just so that it doesn't stick. And then what I don't use, I'm going to be making a pizza. I may make two. I may make a couple. I'm not sure. But and then some bread. I want to leave some extra for bread. So you can see here how the dough has absorbed some of the liquid, and it is sticky. So, and that's completely fine. You'll have that as the dough absorbs the flour. So you can just lightly, and it has grown as well. So you can just lightly dust the flour here. You can see here how it's stiffer than it was earlier, right? It will, it'll almost feel like it's breaking apart as you're handling it. That's completely normal. When we end up cooking it, it will end up forming into one, and it'll be really good. So now what I'm going to do is I have it here, and I'm going to place it on my parchment paper. So you can see, you pick it up, and it's, it is a little sticky. So you don't need to roll this out. This is just literally just pressed by hands. I'll move this up so you can see it. You want to kind of press this out. If it does break on you, not a problem. You can just get some more dough and kind of fill in the area that broke out. The trick with all pizza dough, actually the trick with all breads and pizzas and things like that, is to prepare it the day before and let it rest in the fridge. That gives time for the gluten, or in this case the starches in the flour, to come together and to bond properly. If you want the edges to rise a little bit, you can clump it up at the end. It will rise nicely. Just for the sake of speed, I'm not gonna make it look pretty, but okay. So this one has been done. Now, we've pressed it by hand, right? So any of the air bubbles that are in the dough will have been pushed down, and you want it to kind of slightly grow. So what we're going to do is put this on a pan. I have it here. Slide this onto a pan, and we'll let it sit for a couple hours. It's not going to grow more than this. It might just plump up a little bit, which is exactly what you want. We can put a little bit of olive oil on it. Actually, I might do that right now. Olive oil will get absorbed into the flour, into the dough. This will be like ready to go when I'm ready to put the ingredients on it and put it in the oven. Now, the trick with gluten-free is you do need to cook the dough a little bit before you put your toppings. So you don't want to overcook it, but you want to cook it just enough where like the center starts to bubble a little bit. At that point, you can take it out of the oven, and then you can put your toppings. I might make a couple of pizzas. I've made one, as you already saw. I might make another one, but what I want to do is some bread. You're already here making pizza, might as well add a little bit more, and then you get to make bread as well. So I'm just going to show you how I do the bread. just a regular bread pan. I use, once again, parchment paper is your friend. I use parchment paper. I'll be going a little bit fast just because I'm running short on time, but parchment paper. And now you just grab your bread, your flour, kind of twist it a little bit, place it in here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to leave it like this. I might coat it with a little bit of olive oil. My hands are a little sticky right now, but I'll coat it with a little bit of olive oil. Then this cover, bread pan, I will cover it and I'll put it on top, and it will just sit on the counter for the same amount of time that that's sitting on the counter, for a couple of hours. So I placed my gluten-free dough there on the pan, and it's rising. So in the meantime, while that is rising, just for the sake of time, I'm going to start preparing my toppings. Now it's come the time to put the pizza in the oven, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on the bottom and pre-cook this. So why don't we just go ahead and do that right now. We'll grab this. As I mentioned earlier, I have the oven at about 450, and we're just going to put it on our pizza stone here at the bottom. I have a few pizza stones because I'm making a few pizzas. So we're going to do that right now. The bread is just looking delicious. We're going to keep that cap for the bread. We're going to keep that cap on for another 10 minutes, and then we'll take it out and let it dry up a bit. But right now that bread is looking pretty good. Okay, so the pizza has browned, as you can see here. It's browned very nicely. I'm taking this out right now because I don't want it to overcook. So what I'll be doing that just right now. And then I'll just let it sit on the counter to cool. Okay, that's it. Looks so good, very tasty. The bread is still in there. I think the bread will be ready in a few minutes, maybe another 5 minutes. I might take that cap off. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like. If there's any questions, I did want to show at least the process of how I make gluten-free pizza. It turns out really, really good. Try the bread, make extra dough so you can try making the bread, and let me know what you think. All right, until next time, this is Danny Ferry from Fetty's Cucina.